Welcome, Commander. This is the Pause Assembly Podcast. I'm your heavy rookie host with 12 will, and I really need to get out of here. No! I'm joined by Player 1.
Hey, I'm Aaron. I have a 95% chance to hit. Our deaths are assured.
And Player 2.
I'm Leaky, and I really have nothing clever to say, so insert your own.
Today we'll be covering XCOM Enemy Unknown and its expansion, Enemy Within. I think there were some costumey things that came out in like Game of the Year editions and stuff. I know nothing about them. I think they were just cosmetic. Enemy Unknown was released in October 2012 and March 2013 for Enemy Within. There will always be an undercurrent of hardcore strategy fans in the gaming firmament, but the way that this game at the time of release captured people is nothing short of extraordinary. To just name off some of the things that this game was up against in that very same year, 2012. Mass Effect 3, Dishonored, Borderlands 2, Far Cry 3, and the 400-pound demon gorilla that should have killed them all, that we all should still be playing instead of doing something like this, Diablo 3. And in many ways, that XCOM's the most notable title that came out during that time. Anyway, XCOM is here too referred to as XCOM because we're not going to be covering the other titles, UFO or Enemy Unknown from the Deep or whatever the hell. Turn-based strategy. Would you call it a strategy RPG? I'd say it's a strategy game first, but it has RPG-like elements. Say like in a second.
Yeah. To the extent that you maintain any of the same characters over the course of a campaign.
Fair enough. In which I would call it a founding, if not resurrecting, title in the planetary defense subgenre. You are defending the Earth against a technologically and numerically superior opponent in whatever capacity that may take the form of, but normally it's aliens, and I'm going to put the aliens guy picture here. The game is divided into two sections until Enemy Unknown, in which you kind of have a sort of covert ops side questy thing that you can do. You got your strategy layer, which is you managing resources, outfitting your troops, picking their skills, and the memorial frequently. And then you got your tactical layer, which is the meat and potatoes. You're fighting, you're directly acting against the aliens. Let's start. Anybody got anything they want to start with?
I have not played the Enemy Within, although that is on my list of things to do. So my expertise is sort of limited there. I know that the game has you fighting against some faction of humans that, for whatever reason, does not want the world protected from aliens.
Exalt. I'll get to them in due time. But
okay.
I guess we can start with our. I keep forgetting about Leaky's suggestion. I guess we can start about our experience with this game. I have way back. I played the original UFO, Enemy Unknown, and XCOM Terror from the Deep. There were a few more games in the series, including two canceled ones I remember that I was kind of excited for, but I never quite got my hands on. So when they were the ill-fated 2013 The Bureau XCOM declassified, I was but that was like in 2008 that they were talking about that game. I was really excited for a return to XCOM, but I didn't know they were going to do a first-person shooter until 2 years later when they're like, hey, it's first-person shooter now. And I'm like, and then this game came out. And then I played the absolute freaking hell out of it in 2012. And there's a reason why I wrote out that intro, because at this time we are in the throes of a streamlining of what video games were. They were less art form and more business at at that time, and this game comes right smack in the middle of it. I did not. Now that I look at that intro, I didn't name any Wii games, but those were the games that personified that era. I think Dark Souls would come out the next year. Make that a apparent. I think in October and October of 2013, and between the two in such a short amount of time opened people's eyes. Well, I'm getting off on a tangent here. I bought XCOM 2 basically on the. I didn't even look at the gameplay that they were touting. I was just like, well, more XCOM by these guys. Let's do it.
My experience with the new XCOM, anyway, is probably going to be the smallest amount of experience here in the group. I've played some XCOM Enemy Unknown, but I've played more. I played more XCOM UFO Defense than I played Enemy Unknown. I played more Terror from the Deep. I played more XCOM like Apocalypse than than Enemy Unknown.
Yeah.
Now that's not necessarily because I tried the game and didn't like it. I just I have a feeling that in order to play that game properly, it's going to require an investment of time that I just haven't had. But I'm looking forward to giving it a shot, and based on what I've been hearing about XCOM 2, particularly with the new expansion that just came out, it sounds like I'm going to have to give that a go too.
That would be War of the Chosen, and that came out 2 weeks ago. Just to give this episode a timestamp. XCOM 2.
Something like that.
But yeah, I have to say that I've always loved the theme of the XCOM games. I grew up at a time when shows like the X-Files were huge, and like the whole prospect of like UFOs and aliens and conspiracy, that sort of thing, has always been super interesting to me. So XCOM is sort of a natural fit for the kind of things that I'm interested in. And I'm definitely looking forward to getting deeper into those games as soon as time will.
There too.
XCOM didn't exist for me until Enemy Unknown. I just wasn't a series on my radar. I started there. I loved the first game. Picked up the expansion, Enemy Within. Or Enemy Within is basically where I fell in love with the series wholeheartedly. I then moved on to the Long War mod, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point.
Oh yeah, that's on there.
That's where it became. That is where it became. It went from a love to an addiction. Long War is an unhealthy obsession with me. Probably the Long War mod, top 3 most played games of all time, and I loved every minute of it. I still love every minute of it. I picked up XCOM 2 because it had the name XCOM, and I recently picked up War of the Chosen, the expansion to XCOM 2. And
yeah, it sounds like I'm gonna have to do that.
That just the same as well. So,
all right.
I guess in comparison to Aaron, I'm probably the heavyweight of the group and have spent the most time with it.
I'm here. Let's go over what the game is for a second, because I think this is where the meat and potatoes of this game are. While you're in the strategy layer, you have to... I said that you had to manage your troops. This is not time-consuming, but it is... Like, time advances when you say it advances, even though I believe in 2, it advances regardless. It's not turns, but actual time. You can fast-forward time, but certain projects require a certain amount of days. Oh, you can research, you can refit things, you can build things, and you also have to build your headquarters, your base, which I don't remember. That wasn't a throwback, was it? Did you build your base in
Enemy Unknown?
Yes.
Yeah.
Enemy UFO Defense.
Because I know you still had to intercept UFOs there. I don't remember building my base. Anyway, I'm getting off track. You had to literally excavate and build specific buildings, power centers, communication centers, which allowed you to use more satellites so that you could increase coverage, radar coverage on the map, so that you could catch UFOs entering the atmosphere. When you identified who they were, you could scramble fighters that you would also have to build and maintain to attempt to shoot them down, which I remember is like directly from UFO, the old UFO. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And there goes that like 10-day project you just $1 billion or whatever. If you play your cards right, if you play your cards right on normal difficulty, it's like a 1 out of 10 chance that you'll fail against equivalent UFOs. But then you have the option at the crash site to go investigate the crash site, and that's when the tactical layer starts. Sometimes there are terror attacks that the aliens will throw at you, and there's an advancing narrative as to what the aliens are, who they are, why they're here, that you have to kind of story missions. But the entire time you're trying to get ready for those, you have to go through these emergent missions that are coming after you. All while they'll come in batches of 2 or 3, and they'll be at different points in the globe. So normally the terror attack specifically, the result of you picking one location means that the other 2 locations just get shafted, and your support. Oh yeah, XCOM is funded by a coalition of nations called the Council of Nations, and those nations will withdraw their support if their support gets too low. Less money out of your pocket, which is less money to fight the aliens. So you're kind of you're not only on a time limit, but you're also spinning plates while you're doing. However, your technology is advancing, you're doing research, you're trying to fight the aliens with strategery, and you're slowly becoming a force to be reckoned with. At least that's the way it is on the normal difficulty level. Anything higher than that, and it looks an awful lot like saving and reloading. The game becomes a test of your system specs.
With regards to the mechanics of Enemy Unknown, the game is considerably streamlined compared to the old XCOM games, but yeah. I don't feel like they took out anything that was particularly vital to the experience. Like in the earlier games, like darkness was a very big factor, and if you went into an area at night, your soldiers couldn't see, and so you had to throw flares at locations that you wanted to create light at so you'd be able to see. And like it was cool the first 10 or 15 times you had to do it, but that's the kind of thing that I'm not sorry to see go.
I just want to, I guess, highlight the simplicity of Enemy Unknown. That I didn't play the older games, so I don't really have too much to compare them to, but no aspect from base building to managing your money to the actual in-game battles, none of it seemed to be particularly hard to learn, and you could just kind of pick up and play.
Super approachable for the difficulty that it was lauded for.
And it didn't get bogged down in a lot of the unnecessary ideas that the older games sound like they have, from darkness to your base management was kind of bloated and things like that. And I just wanted to highlight how well it was done, the simplicity of all aspects. And there's a lot, once you get into the game, once you know the game a little bit, to really sink your teeth into and expand upon the basic premise of the game. But just from the beginning, simplicity really did make the game that much more accessible.
If you skip the tutorial, you could almost be mistaken. XCOM could be easily mistaken for a mobile game. I mean, the presentation...
the game, in fact, has been released on mobile and plays pretty well.
Oh, neat. This game screams iPad to me, and it works, apparently. So, thumbs up there. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Leaky.
No. Like that's all I just thought it was another aspect of how approachable that game was.
So to get in a little bit on what I've meant by if you skip the tutorial. So you got your dudes, right? You got your dudes. All of these, and I can really call them characters. I can't really call them units. I can't call them troops because they really they have names, they have nationalities, they have you can set what language they're talking about. They have a rank, they have a class. They also have 4 stats, which I'll get into in a second. But each one of these voice sets that you can have, like they have, I mean, there's a variety of over like 20 lines that they could say, given an opportunity to say something, and they will say it depending on what's going on. I just I was going to give a couple of examples, and then I remembered that I installed the Hot Fuzz mod for voice lines. So I was just going to start quoting Hot Fuzz.
I installed the Twin Peaks dialogue mod, so whenever one of the voice triggers activates, the characters just stare at each other for 5 minutes without saying anything. It's pretty great.
Or your character's 4, and you have the capability of upgrading 6 normally.
Yes.
And they have, I mentioned rank. I think off the top of my head, squatty, corporal, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, major, colonel. I get that right?
Something like that. I don't.
I'm looking it up. Anyway, every time that they advance beyond the rookie, they start in squatty. All of the dudes that you get start in squatty, and the moment that first time they rank up, the first time they get a class, I think at random, and all of their stats are randomized, which I'm going to get into now. But when they normally advance in rank, they get another ability. And these abilities, for whatever class that they are what define the character, just short of their stats. And I think this is where, and I'm jumping ahead, this is where the game sort of falls short. One imperfection, this one fly on the wedding cake, is that with the numbers being generated randomly, with the stats being generated randomly, you could just end up with a sniper, your only sniper with crap aim, and then that's a bad sniper. Or even worse, your heavy has a terrible aim. Something that needs to have a 99% chance of killing everything in an area missing is just no bueno. To the point where if you had any experience with the game and you were starting out, there is a threshold of capability that you would want your initial starting team to have, or else the early missions were harder than they need to be, which is saying something, even on normal difficulty.
I'll just point out the stats tend to equalize as you go up in rank, and that is the key, because whatever class you're assigned, do get which class you are as you rise up in rank. So even if you start out with a low aim sniper, being probably your best squad mate in terms of aim by the end game, because sniper just gets so many bonuses to aim.
Yep.
So
do you get experience directly for killing things, or do all of your characters get experience for just completing the mission, or both? I never checked.
In the original Enemy Unknown, it is only kills.
Well, that's sort of to my point. Like you have to kill something in order to get the experience, in order to advance. So you are, in short, kind of a slave to specifically that one stat. That is quite literally the only bad thing. Well, that and some of the graphics hiccups it has, or the earliest versions of the game had, but that's negligible. Anyway, the characterization of the characters on the board is nothing short of, like, it pulled people in. To top it off, people at the time were renaming their characters after their friends, so because they could. What this created was the game by itself is not, tactical lair is not easy. You can't just take your favorite dude, aim him, and run up to an alien and just shoot them and hope to God that nothing else can affect him. It's not Gears of War. Cover, they make a point of mentioning that cover is going to be the only thing that stands between you and death in the tutorial, and they are right. Cover provides a specific defensive bonus that directly affects the aim of anything shooting at you. The aliens take cover too. There's almost always more of them than there are of you, so the only weapon that you really have is methodical, deliberate, which looks a lot like moving from cover to cover until you spot something. Oh, yeah, combat doesn't start immediately in the game. Your dropship lets all your characters out, and you start out in a starting area, like on the grid for the tactical layer, and then you have to proceed through the map looking for aliens. Sometimes they're looking for other things to kill. Sometimes they're just hanging out inside a closet, like I had for 3 mutons once. Then that's when you discover them. If they see you at the same time you see them, they get a free move into cover normally, or some of the more bigger aggressive classes, Berserker, will run directly at you. And then that's when the actual combat starts. So the reason why I say that you're a slave to the aim stat in this game is that I don't know the specific algorithm behind the 2-hit numbers, except for that cover directly takes away from your opponent's aim. When you're outnumbered and you have even half your squad with bad aim numbers, you need to start taking guys off of the enemy's initiative. And that you might as well save yourself 3 hours of saving and reloading at that point. Oh, the game was generous about that. It lets you save in the middle of battle and reload whenever, really. And that really helped keep it approachable to everyone that was not familiar with the combat, or that may have gotten in over their heads, may not have known that some of the choices they made were less than optimal. Quick side note on that, less than optimal choices. There was a correct way to build your base, and you could really screw yourself up early on. I don't know how they didn't catch that, but I think they even admitted that like, oops, we didn't catch that. I think it was literally the press release.
At one point on the aim, if I could.
Go ahead.
There is actually an in-game substitute for aim.
You tell.
Bad aim, and that is grenades, which are items that you can equip. In fact, your starting mission in which you have no control over your troops yet, everyone comes stock with a single grenade. They are one-time use expendable items that does not rely on aim. You throw them, they hit in an area of effect, and they do decent damage for the time. I believe it's
2. No, that's a pistol. 3 damage.
3 or 4 damage, I think. It's been a while since I played vanilla.
In a wide area, guaranteed.
Guaranteed minimum damage, at least 3.
At least 3. There we go.
And does not require aiming. So, I guess just to refute John's point a little bit, game, I guess, if you really have bad aim, you don't get corpses, enemies, and you need corpses later on for research and items and certain things like that. So,
don't get the loot that you would from killing the enemy with some kind of other weapon that was not explosive.
Yeah, explosive, you basically just didn't get anything from that body. Or bodies if there was multiple.
Which has its own long-range repercussions.
Yes, but there is an alternative, so...
You're not screwed, but yes. Making the best out of a bad situation is basically the theme of XCOM. You are expecting you to lose. I don't know. It's expecting you to lose, guys, over the course of this. The thing is that people didn't want to do that. They most certainly did not want to lose dudes, so they just reloaded. So especially, Mr. Croshaw covered this in his XCOM episode. He said that you might as well reload if you lost a late game guy, because there was no bringing along the rookie and having him kill anything without, his certain doom. The enemy AI was keen to pick up on the rank and retirement level of your characters, and would almost maliciously focus on them. But yes, I take your point. So while we're on the subject of explosives, one of the things that this game does amazingly well is deformable terrain. More than once, I was able to, you spot something takes cover behind something else. More than once, you're able to throw a grenade, destroy a whole chunk of wall. I don't know what's in those grenades, but like you'll level an entire like wall of a 10-story building, and then the guy's just sitting there, just like, well, I'm out of cover now, and then you're screwed. A target that is out of cover is not only easier to hit, but they are easier to critically hit for extra damage. This means that you wanted them. You could flank cover too, by the way. I forgot to mention that, to get the same effect. If you can draw a line of sight to an enemy that is behind cover, but cover, say if you were behind or to the side, then you would get the same bonuses as if they were out of cover, because for you they were. So where was I? Oh yeah, blowing up walls and stuff. You could collapse buildings, fire up targets down, so could the aliens. So you got you were outgunned and outnumbered, but you weren't outsmarted. You could make the best of a bad situation by using your head and watching the map, seeing where the avenues of attack were, and setting up the appropriate Overwatch. Overwatch is a command that your characters can take to take a shot on anything moving through their, not necessarily their line of sight, but whatever their weapon's effective range was. And this became the backbone of damage in the early part of the game. You couldn't really make aggressive plays unless you were absolutely certain of a kill, like a flanking style kill, until you had better armor and weapons. You were basically waiting for large formations of thin men to move, which they almost never did in the early part. In the later game, you were that was the only way you were handling lurkers and chrysalid. So, quick heads up: get your favorite war story ready, because I'm going to ask that at the end of the episode. Anyway, this is obviously, like, you can, just from the way that I've been talking about this, you can tell that there's a lot going on in the tactical layer, and this is what people latched onto. They were rewarded, even though they were definitely the underdog. They were rewarded for paying attention, taking that methodical pace, and you can see it in YouTube, guys leaning back and breathing a sigh of relief, that they got out of a bad situation by a well-placed grenade, or maybe even a lucky crit that they were able to capitalize on, and everything in between. And this is where XCOM shined. I don't know how to say that. This is where XCOM shone. You're rewarded for the effort that you were put into the game. And this is something that, at the time of its release, was very scarce.
Yeah, and that tension that you describe sort of stems from the fact that while the tactical layer of the game is actually pretty easy to learn and straightforward to play, unlike many simple tactical games, there is, like, you can't play well enough that you eliminate all risk. The game is very much about risk management, and by playing carefully, you can lower the chance of something catastrophically bad happening, but there's always that chance. You can't get rid of it completely. And so there's always a good amount of tension, even if you feel like you're doing well, because, somebody misses a shot at a bad time, and you could be in for a world of hurt.
The to-hit numbers were Asimovian. Like, you had a 99, 95% chance to hit. That's still a chance of missing, dude. And that came up. That would come up. There's videos all over the internet, and I can tell you a few times myself when you're firing a rocket that would hit everything in 5 hexes, and all 3 of the targets you're aiming for came out without a scratch because it just missed. Because it's there. It's no guarantee whatsoever. Until that thing says 100 or 0, it did not matter, which I don't believe.
Actually, in the original Enemy Unknown, there was a bug. Even 100% could miss.
That's amazing.
But that was a glitch. But yes, even 100% wasn't safe. I think they fixed it, but I don't actually.
So there were ways to. Aaron mentioned risk management, and the abilities that you got in the game are about mitigating the downsides of certain actions or increasing the power of certain actions. And I think there were better choices depending on the class. I'm not going to list all the abilities and all the classes, but I know there were a couple for the support class that I just didn't bother with. I just took the additional heals. You know, you always, unless you're running multiple snipers, you always took the battle scanner ability. That's it off the top of my head. I think the heavy had the most options, like valid options, in my opinion. Of course, there are people that have played this game a shitload longer than I have, but that was just my takeaway. There were some very easy choices, and I think in later patches, especially after Enemy Unknown or Enemy Within, there was a chance that they could get an ability from a different class. Or am I thinking of Long War? Or am I thinking of XCOM 2?
There was in the expansion, there was an option you could take at the beginning of the game, which would randomize your skills tree to some extent, and that's what I believe you're thinking of.
I believe that is the only legitimate way to play this game. There are some choices that are illusory choices, I believe, especially when, say, you're in the slaved to the aim stat. I believe that is the one way that you really help the game remain about choice. Yes, it's kind of dumb if your heavy gets like the pistol extra damage. Can't make it. This is the world's biggest omelet, and you can't fret over a couple of eggs. I don't think I have anything more to say on the tactical layer. I can only say that your character is governing its weapon, which is governing its role in combat. And that's just a distinction I didn't make before. That's neither good nor bad. That's really just about choice. If you want to run 6 snipers, go knock yourself out. If you want to run 6 heavies, go knock yourself out. You want to run 6 supports, I encourage that. to show why you should not do that. Sometimes you need a minigun, you know. Yeah, I think that's it for the tactical layer. Okay, so I want to talk about Enemy Within specifically and what that added. You had, first off, it introduced a new resource called Meld, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
I don't have access to my Steam game, or else I literally just have it up right now looking through all this stuff. Meld was a resource that you could get. It did not occur naturally, but there were things, resource founts on the tactical layer that you could secure and get Meld for. I believe that Meld was used for 3 things. For the mechs, of which you could change your soldiers into giant walking, mechs and a lot larger weapon. It was used to psyops soldiers, which was another way you could get screwed in the random chance if you're how did that work? I don't remember. You had to pick somebody to put into the psi chamber to become a psi soldier, but
yes,
you might just draw 100 there and none of your squad over the course of the game ever capable of being put into that. Is that how that worked?
Yes, there was a chance that your character was gifted.
A new type. Yeah.
and theoretically, the nightmare scenario is that nobody would ever be gifted, but it never worked out that way for me or anything like that.
Yeah, that never happened. I only read about that one. So, and I believe that's you didn't use Meld to build the little robot guys, did you?
No,
I think it was just those 2 things.
There's a couple. I believe there were a couple research things in higher things that you would have to have a threshold of Meld and Meld for. But
did some of the structures need it?
Maybe the psionic chamber or whatever it was. Maybe, I don't remember. And I don't believe any items ever needed Meld to be built. But I suppose I can check on that real quick.
So, but you can only get it by gathering these resources on the tactical layer, which were on a timer. Universally, they were on a timer. So what the game was trying to do was get you to move, to get you to take that risk. You can't see anything over there behind the carport, and the wrecked ambulance, but you can't, except for that there's a meld thing there, so you should go get it, and it's ticking down, and maybe there might be 70 sectoids around that corner. Maybe there's not. The only way to find out would be to move aggressively, but watch your ass at the same time. They incorporated that sort of play more into XCOM 2 more than anything else. I think they really internalized that kind of idea to make the hashtag big plays in XCOM 2 better than Enemy Within.
Just as a side note as well, you could actually gather meld from a mechtoid or a heavy floater as well if you killed them. So.
Both of those were types of enemies. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the additions to Enemy Within. So on the strategy layer, you had to... Okay, so Aaron mentioned it earlier. There are dudes called Exalt that are active on the strategy layer now that directly oppose XCOM. And they do not want... They want alien rule. Is how it's kind of framed, or at the very least they want XCOM to fail. So, and I think was the Geofront the name of the base, or am I thinking of Evangelion?
Geoscape.
Geoscape, thank you. Geoscape. They never attack the Geoscape.
No, it's just the one.
The aliens attack the Geoscape, but not attack your headquarters.
No, you attack theirs.
Yes, I'm getting that. They literally try to undermine what's going on in any sector of the world that supports XCOM. So every so often you just get a message like, oh, you wanted all those credits from North America? Nope, Exalt's active there. And then you have to pour soldiers on a covert mission, and they're gone for a period of days to infiltrate Exalt and find out where there is/are, if there are multiple, and then that's when you have to hit Exalt. On the map, Exalt is the single most threatening group of jerks in that game, solely because they have the same equipment as XCOM does. And that is to say that they have rocket launchers, and they will use them. They will use them. And they are just as effective as your rocket launcher. When you make hard contact with Exalt operatives, your first goal is to single out any guys with rocket launchers and annihilate them before they went all rocket launcher on you, before they started playing Quake 1. And that was devastating unless you had... Of course, that sort of added to the challenge, but sometimes those groups were mobile, and sometimes you were moving methodically, as you do, and just 3 of them would just show up on the map. They'd all take their free move on their turn in the cover, and all 3 of them would fire rockets at separate times. And you're just like, great, time to reload. There was an interesting mechanic that they expanded upon in XCOM 2, where you could, from moving by having your covert operative hack the transmitter tower. Your covert operative, when it was time, they would send you the signal, you would come and try to extract them. Your covert operative had the capability of interacting with special buildings that were on the map, called transmitter towers, and he could actually jam their communications from those transmitter towers, but he always started away from the rest of your XCOM characters. So he was there alone with just a pistol. So you had to weigh the risk of having him not just hiding in a corner, because if he died, that was mission failed, and Exalt wins, they still take your credits out of the area, and you have to go through the whole process. But he was invaluable during those times because he could jam those guys that are trying to Quake 1 you straight into a wall. And then you could use your own rockets to Unreal Tournament them straight back. There were choices to make even there, I guess is the point that I was making. And the game was fantastic about that. It just turned out that sometimes you were in a world of bullshit. So you do... anybody have anything there?
I hate Exalt. There, I said it.
Exalt's terrible. Well, I can't say Exalt's terrible, but Exalt was disappointing, and I'm getting to that. You do enough covert ops, and you find out where Exalt's headquarters are, and you raid it. You kill the operatives that are there that are like the same guys that you've been facing, only more of them. It's a unique map, but it's the same every time, and it's sort of difficult. But there's no boss there. There's no I am the head of Exalt, and he doesn't expunge why the hell it is. It's just that they're dead. They're done. That's it. They're not an advance. They're not the vanguard of the alien forces or anything. There's no story beat to it. It's just they're dead. You don't have to worry about the mechanic anymore. It's just a drop ball, and you get to keep all your covert operatives, and they get to have abilities, though I forget which ones specifically. Vicky?
I'm drawing a blank.
Turns out there is no additional ability that your dude gets for completing covert ops, though it does get extra experience. So there's that. Also expect more of these. You take this wild diversion of time for the benefit of not having your shit hijacked. And it's kind of a drop ball, but I did sort of enjoy the cat and mouse game that it introduced, and they expanded upon that in the sequel a little bit better, I think, especially in War of the Chosen. We'll get to that during the War of the Chosen episode, I guess.
Just to state my opinion on Exalt. I don't mind Exalt. Like you, I feel disappointed. I think my disappointment comes from the fact everything in this game has multiple strategy to approach, but Exalt felt very linear in that regard. Everyone kind of figures out the exact same plan to deal with them. You find their rockets, and then you kill them, pick them off at your leisure after that. The strategy just seems to be very simplistic with them, so it was your job at that point. You punched in, you punched out. There was no difference in fighting them from one game to another with different soldiers. It was just one tactic over and over again. So it just kind of wore you out and was never really fun like most of the rest of the game, where, like I said, there were multiple strategies, different tactics you could do with different classes and things like that. It just seemed to be lacking. So I think, for me personally, that's where Exalt kind of dropped the ball.
It did seem like the world's shittiest port of Fallout Tactics when Exalt was firing on all cylinders. It was one group of guys behind concrete blocks versus another group of guys with guns behind concrete blocks, now that I'm really thinking about it. Actually, I'm kind of mad because some of the maps were like desert wasteland. I can't believe they pulled that off and I didn't notice. I should have been furious. What? Haven't I done this before? Oh, look at this. I'm walking undercover very carefully, hoping they don't spot me so I can shoot them in the side. Yeah, that's Exalt. That's what Enemy Within added, for good or for ill. There were some new weapons that they added. I always used the Exalt guns because I thought they looked better, but I mean, outside of that, they gave you
some balance issues, and in the beginning of the game, there were new options that could customize your game better.
Yes, there were.
Which Enemy Within added options. They were called the second wave options. They were actually in the game before. I thought they were added during the DLC. They were not. They only expanded upon. And they gave you options to customize your games. From the aforementioned ability to give your soldiers a custom skill tree, somewhat custom skill tree, to abilities like making sure all your rookies had the same starting baseline stat line, and to the aforementioned aim problems in the beginning of the game. There were also abilities like Red Fog, which if your soldier was wounded in battle and took damage, he offered an aim penalty.
And of course, the most important option at the start of the game is Iron Man mode, which is my personal favorite. It disallows the kind of saving and loading that we've been talking about throughout the course of the podcast. It limits you to one save file, so really anything bad that happens to you is permanent.
But yes, the DLC Enemy Within added a bunch of new options to customize your game, and gave people like me, who were always trying to play it differently each time, even more replayability.
The game is lauded for its replayability as well as its accessibility, it looks like. So Yeah. For once, my opinion is one of the main streams. I have to talk about multiplayer. Yeah.
That game has multiplayer?
It was just pointed out to me, we didn't cover the other big stat in the game, that is will. At a certain level of action upon your character, will is tested. The character's will is tested, and if they fail, they will break. That meaning that you no longer control the character, and they do things randomly, like move. They will almost always retreat from any seen enemies, but then they will do dumb shit like shoot at your own guys behind the line of scrimmage, which means that they get critical bonuses. And they will do it in a panic voice, which I was trying to parody at the beginning of this episode.
Every XCOM veteran has at least one or two stories where one of his soldiers inevitably turned on him and killed their entire squad. It's just kind of a rite of passage.
It's a rite of passage. That's exactly how I was going to play it. It just happens sometimes. You always want high stats, period. But this game, you kind of need it in certain aspects. And the first time this happens, that's the first time that you realize that. That you want all of your squaddies to have a high will. They address that in 2 a lot better, I think. That's another discussion. No, I mean, that's it. That simple mechanic is in this game. That one simple fact, just the potential of one of your dudes going nuts in the middle of a firefight that you already are the underdog in, is kind of a stroke of genius. I believe Will's secondary to aim, because you can play Will up. You can you identify a low will character, you make them your sniper, and you keep them back. Or you
will never comes up until it comes up, and then it's screwed.
Until it comes up.
Always come up. Will doesn't necessarily always come up. So yes, in that regard, I agree with you.
You can play back with those characters, letting higher willed characters that are going to inevitably draw aggro forward because they're forward. Yes. And that will not guarantee that Will won't come up for those people, but it will make sure that it doesn't come up immediately for the ones that you're holding back with lower will.
It also incentivizes bringing higher level troops with you with lower level troops, so that they have higher will, and a lot of them have abilities that will give higher will to, say, surrounding teammates and things like that. So,
oh yeah. You want to know the quickest way to lower characters' will? That is to have somebody break in front of them. So, more often than not, if one person broke, the rest of your squad would break. And that's a reloading.
Incidentally, this is one of the mechanics that was carried over from the earlier games. Your soldiers used to have a stat called Bravery. The primary difference between that and Will in this game is that this wasn't something that came up every now and then. It was something that came up every freaking mission, at least in the beginning of the game, because people who failed their will test and panicked would almost invariably die. So by the time you got to the late game, your roster was stacked with people who were just not afraid of anything, because to be afraid is to get killed in those games.
Every one of your dudes had seen 3 other dudes do that same thing, and that wasn't going to be the never be game over.
Also, I'd just like to point out, like, this one, I think, proves the whole a single small stone can still cause a huge ripple. Because, yeah, we all have stories of our teammates turning on us and killing half our squad. So when a soldier panics, he hunkered down. And when he hunkers down, that will forfeit his turn, even though it's not a negative because he's getting extra defense and he's away from the enemy. But just taking away a turn like that and just probably delaying your plans for a turn or so just by removing one piece, it could just completely throw off scenario.
To your point, Yeah, I've brought it up more times than not. Like, you had to research the upgrades to get five or so. For a good chunk of the dangerous part of the game, the early part of the game, you've got full, and when one of them just says screw it, I'm down this turn, you're just like, huh, that's my entire battle plan out the way. Yeah.
And that
It is
concept
not a
isn't
benefit.
new in games, like the idea of a character over for it. But I can't think of any other game where it manages to be as significant as it is in XCOM.
That goes back to emergent gameplay, as I was that right there formed the basis of more war stories about countless acts of heroism and 10 times that number of horrifying at the hand of the alien.
But
It
yes,
took us so long to get through that.
that was all I wanted to say. God
It was
damn
to get.
I know we're gonna have to cut again, but
All right. Well, you're gonna get to go on a rant here. I'm gonna bring up mods. So this is not the game where that made mods big. Far from it. That was Fallout, but Fallout 3 specifically. Oh well, Skyrim. This game really benefited from mods. I mentioned adding new voice packs. Some did full class convert, and some rewrote the entire game. And by rewrote the entire game, I need specifically Long War mod gain notoriety, taking the base principles, the pillars of gameplay that XCOM Enemy Unknown was built on.
So yes, the Long War mod for me and several other people is not a mod; it's an expansion to the original game. It didn't so much as add anything new. It just kind of expanded what was already there, made it stylized, and from that brought in new ideas. But it didn't just concepts in the game. Same thing for like the soldiers and your troops. It didn't redefine any new roles your troops were already doing. It just kind of specialized them more from the beginning of the game, or from the vanilla.
Vanilla is a catch-all term applied to games with additional content put out for them. It refers to the base game without any mods, DLC, map packs, anything that would alter the fundamental gaming experience.
Probably for me, its biggest feature, John mentioned it slightly in the last segment. Difficulty curve starts really, really hard, and then as you progress, it gets much easier. New research, new items, it just kind of coalesces into you becoming more powerful than the enemies, like a standard game.
To that, specifically, XCOM ramps up the difficulty of the encounters by time and how far along you are in the research tree. You are never more than one or two battles ahead of the curve if, say, you get lucky. But you can be very, very far behind, as the case may be. Long War, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of gets rid of that part of the curve in the beginning to where you could be facing advanced enemy units to a certain degree. You're not facing sectoids, or not sectoids, but what are the big mechs called?
Sectopods.
Sectopods, thank you. You're not facing sectopods on mission 1, unless you are. But
no.
You would run into, say, 9 thin men, 12 sectoids, and a group of mutons on the first mission sometimes, if you were extremely unlucky. And that's not a winnable scenario, no matter what your tactics are. And the mod encourages you to hit that retreat button in that capacity. You are not overtly punished for doing that. You were going to lose less by retreating than you were by staying and trying to fight that hopeless battle.
And I guess to go back to a point that we talked about earlier, which was risk management, there was always a risk in Long War that wasn't always there in vanilla XCOM.
Very true. Very true.
And Long War just expanded upon risk management. It was always risky, even in the late game. Once you had trained soldiers, it was, it was always risky to take this ability from a soldier because the other ability was still just as good. Not that everyone didn't have their favorite or anything like that, but it just generally expanded upon, and actually it felt much more like an expansion than a mod for almost every other game out. To the point that it was so well recognized, Long War Studio, the studio that did Long War, they worked simultaneously so that when XCOM 2 launched, it came with free mods from Long War Studios.
Long War Studios
available.
Is an actual development house now.
Now.
It?
Yes. Yeah. They're creating their own game.
I said this before, I can't stress it enough. They basically built their own game and they didn't realize it. Until they realized it. They're one of the better success stories in gaming of the past few years. Firaxis said, hey, you guys are actually really good at this, and help, please. I know that the guy that was the head of Long War Studios had a job for a while, Firaxis. It's like him, the guy that redid basically the Dark Souls port, and the guy that was behind the Ruby game on PC, that all just got recognized by Senpai and then was elevated immediately, I think. Yes.
Yeah, the Long War Studios has a miraculous tale.
The reason why I want to bring this up, and why I'm glad Leaky brought this up, is that nobody puts that kind of effort into a game unless they see the potential in it. These guys loved the game. They were like, hey, you know what would be great? This. And then they built it again from the ground up. These guys learned code because they loved that risk management, risk versus reward. Everything about it, they had to have loved to do this. And it became a career for a couple of them.
And also, just another point, towards the end of their career, not when they started, they were just a couple of modders. But towards the end of their Long War 1 specifically modding careers, they worked with Firaxis even then. And I just wanted to point out how well Firaxis was willing to work with not only Long War Studios, but modders in general. They're just the most well-known. At least I, as a fan, really appreciated that. Instead of, not to get political, but come up with a convoluted scheme where you were charging people...
Political. the big controversy right now, to add another timestamp to this, is
fuck you, Bethesda.
Is Bethesda and paid mods, their creation club. Yeah, I got nothing on that, but the last thing that was actually all a segue from Willpower. I was supposed to talk about multiplayer. Okay, multiplayer in this game kind of sucks, but it wasn't balanced for multiplayer is what I should say. It was more or less balanced for the single player campaign, and then they just let you use all the units, which is all well and good when you're both playing XCOM soldiers, but you can play the aliens in the multiplayer mode. You had a point value. Oh my god, this game was Fallout Tactics.
Yeah.
Holy crap, this game was Fallout Tactics, and I just didn't notice. So every unit had a point value, and you had a maximum point value that was set by the host of the game. You bought your units based on that, and some of the later alien units had really special abilities, like being able to take over enemy soldiers and what have you. So yeah, multiplayer sometimes degenerated into Quake 1. Other times it turned into, oh god, I've never even seen that alien type before. I'm not even that far in the game. Oh, and all of your guys are dominated, and I have like 7 armor. So suck it. But I wanted to give props here because the multiplayer didn't feel like that it detracted from the single player experience. That they did not remove resources from the principal team to make a multiplayer that nobody was going to play anyway. And I know that there are some guys that really like the multiplayer, so good on them.
I've put 300, 400, 500 plus hours into XCOM. I've played one multiplayer match.
I think it was with me, wasn't it?
No, I don't think we ever played.
Did we not? I played one match, and that's where the Quake 1 thing came from.
Yeah, but
it degenerated into rockets for
but
anybody.
yes, like you said, it never it felt tacked on because I didn't care about it, but it never felt like it detracted from the game. It was kind of a cool feature, and I'm sure some people out there really enjoyed it. It just wasn't for me.
That's literally all there is to say about it. I mean, you basically remove the AI as a player opponent and put a player as a player.
I suppose if you could get a group of people that could play regularly or something, it could be a lot of fun for me. But yes,
It wasn't more than 1-on-1, was it? It was never like 3v3.
No, I don't believe so.
Yeah, that on an already flimsy basis, that sounded nuts. Okay, the last thing I wanted to talk about for XCOM Enemy Unknown is that it directly revitalized a long dead genre of imitators, the planetary defense subgenre. The most notable of which, I don't know which is the most notable now. I would have said Xenonauts before, a month ago, when we had literally a Nintendo AAA clone of XCOM called Mario and Rabbids come out, which is just amazing to me. Like, first off, Mario and the fucking Rabbids. Okay, what year is it? But second, like, that it's basically XCOM. That, like, it is XCOM with Nintendo characters and what? Ubisoft? Are they the ones that did Rayman? Yeah.
Yeah, they're the. I've heard that I have not played it myself, but I've heard that the game is actually really good.
Yeah, all they had to do was take XCOM principles and put Mario on it.
There is the addition of mechanics that make sense in a Mario game. There is an advantage to be had bouncing off the heads of several enemies in the same turn and that sort of thing. It's
okay, that does sound cool.
pretty cool, actually.
I know that there is the mechanic that folks are complaining about in that game is that, like, you have to field, for some reason there's rabid clones of, like, the main Mario cast, like Mario, Luigi, and Princess Peach.
Yeah.
And, like, you have to field one of them or something like that. And, like, you can't just have Nintendo characters beating up on Rabbids. And, like, that sounds like the most Ubisoft decision. Like, that sounds like somebody at Ubisoft was like, well, we need a certain amount of market exposure for putting our people in this game. Anyway, there's one more that I cannot remember off the top of my head, and I could not remember its name. There is one more planetary defense game. It's an indie title that isn't Xenonauts that I was kind of making googly eyes at. I'm referring to Phoenix Point, which is in development from the creator of the very first XCOM, Julian Gallup. He promises something more grander in scope for this game, with larger enemies, almost boss sizes, and vehicles and what have you. Also a more involving geoscape with the ocean. Link in the description. Oh, and he calls them turn-based tactics and world-based strategy games. So who am I to argue? Should be out in 2018. Looks good. Massive Chalice. Massive Chalice is also a... but that one, wow. That was 2014, I think.
Yeah, it's been a while.
They did not support that game. I don't think they met their... Like, I know it had, like, a partial Kickstarter, but they did not further support that game at all, which is a damn shame. If you can imagine XCOM but in a fantasy setting, then that's Massive Chalice. And it was a lot of fun. The time mechanic that they used was years and not, say, days. So your characters grew old, and you had to assign them houses so that they'd have children so that their descendants could carry on the fight against this alien horde. And it was brilliantly executed. It just, after a while, there wasn't more of the game. I don't know where that game fell flat, but I guess if we ever end up talking about Massive Chalice, I'll actually think about it. So Yeah, there are multiple games like XCOM out there now, and XCOM has a full sequel and an expansion that just came out. So, yeah, like there's if this one isn't for you, there's plenty of others to try. I would say. Oh, which brings me to my conclusion, which is I don't think I can actually recommend this game to like general audiences. It's weird, isn't it? Because I spent a lot of time talking about how accessible the game is, even if its difficulty is difficult. But the methodical pace that I prefer in games like this is a feature and on full display for this game, and I just don't know many people like that. I wouldn't even say that you two are are in that same boat, though we do have sort of almost completely overlapping Venn diagrams as far as interests go, except for Braid.
I think actually I think it's that accessible that you don't have to play with its accessibility, its abundance of options, and just how well made the game was. I think pick it up and appreciate it to some level. There'll be people that don't like it, of course, like every game. But I think it's that well made that most people just go into it neutral. Could probably find some enjoyment out of it.
Closing thoughts, player one?
I don't think that people would be necessarily turned off by the difficulty of the game simply because it's so customizable. But I think that the biggest impediment for people picking up the game is the same one that I experienced, is that it's not the type of game that you can pick up and play for like 5 or 10 minutes and then drop it and go do something else. Like, if you don't have a certain amount of time to sit down and play it,
Hours.
Yeah, you're not going to get a whole lot out of it.
Fair point.
But that being said, yeah, I think it's certainly a game that people should try if they have the if they can work it into the schedule.
I got one point.
Oh, go for it.
Just as a final topping about how much I love XCOM. This game wasn't supposed to be made.
Oh yeah.
Firaxis when they started bring back XCOM, it was never supposed to be a strategy RPG like it is now. It was supposed to be a shooter. If that sounds familiar, that's because the game came out. It was called XCOM Declassified: The Bureau. It's largely been hailed as a negative light.
It's been largely forgotten, sir.
Original XCOM, Enemy Unknown, it was kind of thrown together somewhat last minute as an homage to the original XCOM players that were out there and who were angry over forums, as an afterthought. And it revitalized the franchise, it revitalized the genre.
It usurped
the
market that the Bureau was supposed to be appealing to. Like, it was supposed to be appealing to the nostalgia of old XCOM games, and it completely, Enemy Unknown almost completely destroyed any hope of success that the Bureau had. The Bureau came out, I think, in 2013 or 2014, and it did not do well. I mean, look at the other games like that I listed before that it would have had to have competed with.
And I just wanted to share how amazing that truly was.
All right. Favorite war stories from XCOM Enemy Within.
I'm just gonna go ahead and hand this off to Leaky.
It was a new mission in the expansion Enemy Within that took place in Newfoundland, and it involved a mission in a boat. This boat,
it was a whaling boat.
It was a whaling boat. It is known from XCOM players far and wide as on a certain type of enemy called a chrysalid every turn after a certain threshold into the mission. You had to advance so far into the map. And it would continuously spawn this enemy that was its big thing is that it hit really hard. It was a melee-only unit, moved a very long range.
An exceptionally long range. It was exceptionally fast.
Depending on the difficulty that you took this mission on, it could spawn up to 5, 6, 7 chrysalids a turn if you were not careful. And my favorite memory is the first time I played that game, and I did not know about this mission beforehand. XCOM mission, in which you normally undertake this, you're probably killing about 20 aliens with 87 confirmed alien deaths. And I killed all of them. More. And I guess the remarkable aspect of that also is that I left that with all of my soldiers still intact. Only one wounded, which I'm still proud of.
You were playing XCOM, man. That was Starship Troopers. I'm sorry to tell you.
And I loved every minute of it.
My experience with the game is such that I don't have any particularly interesting stories. But I would be happy to listen to someone else tell one.
Alright, so I forget how this one got set up, but it was a lone survivor scenario, and it was this chain reaction of just bad things that happened. And I know somebody died. They broke the guy next to them. Yeah, it was on a crowded overpass that was attacked by aliens, so there were burning cars everywhere.
Another map.
The first guy died due to good old-fashioned alien accuracy. It happens. It broke the guy next to him that was the support that had the capability. If you healed a guy that was broken, they'd have a chance, or they always rallied. I'm not entirely certain anymore for that game anyway. The support broke, ran back, fired and killed a guy that hadn't broke, who broke my 5th member of the squad, who he turned around, he killed the support, who he killed the support, and that left my sniper, who had there's an armor called spider armor, something like that. No, he had the jetpack. Either way, he was all the way in the back, and like I always imagined him going, "What the fuck is going on?" and he didn't break for whatever reason, right? So I let my 5th member of the squad did not ever recover over the course of the mission, but the aliens took care of him, right? So, but the aliens had advanced so quickly and so far that it put them all into this perfect kill zone for the sniper, and so the mission wasn't over. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna play this out. This is way too funny. I'm gonna see this, right? And through a bit of aerial maneuvering and good old fashioned headshots, I completed that mission, and it was just the one guy that came back. And from then on, I made sure that there was a sniper at the center of my formation. I wasn't always running snipers, but I saw that just distance from when shit hits the fan might be more than enough to save the mission. I don't remember any of those people's names, but I do also remember that was the last group of soldiers who I named after my friends. Because it was obvious. I was like, damn it, Aaron! What do you have against these people? You know, and what have you. But I think that about does it for this one. Player 1, plug something.
I do a webcomic called The Fisherman, which you can find at fishermancomic.com.
What are you playing right now?
Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup.
Leaky, anything to plug?
Support me on my Patreon, Red Letter Media.
What are you playing right now?
XCOM 2 and the third DLC of Neo.
Okay. You're listening to what I'd be plugging here. And I am currently playing a game called Stars in Shadow, a 4X space strategy game that has art and assets done by one of my favorite webcomic artists. No, not Aaron. I forget his name, but he does the Outsider webcomic. He's as big of a fan of blue women and spaceships as I am. That said, I think that's just about it. Oh, our next episode is going to be Diablo 1 and 2. We're going to put them both in an episode. So that
we'll probably shit on Diablo 3 too.
It's less a Diablo franchise retrospective at that point, but yeah, definitely we're probably going to talk Diablo 3, but the point is to talk about Diablo 1 and 2. So, look forward to that. Snappy outline.
Bye.
A few things before we go. This is your completely overwhelmed audio mixer, John. Leaky's audio dropped like crazy. I did what I could. We've addressed the problem since then. Player 1 provides the art and music. Player 2 provides the Chipotle, #not sponsored. Follow us at Pause Assembly on Twitter and youtube.com/pauseassembly. Thanks for listening. This has been the most grandest squeaky chair podcast.